that whole mail-in ballot regime that's going to try to steal this election is based on the idea that you're not allowed to go outside because you'll die of the coronavirus. People are dropping like flies from coronavirus, even though only 6% of deaths are directly attributable to coronavirus, exclusively attributable to coronavirus. Forget about that. Don't worry. Everyone's at risk, even though the median age of a coronavirus victim is older than the life expectancy in the United States. You forget about that. Healthy people need to wear masks and stay home and never go outside and mail in your ballots. It'll all be fine after November 3rd. Well, it turns out the people pushing all that BS don't believe it themselves. Secret security camera footage. This is my favorite story of the whole day. Secret security camera footage from San Francisco now shows Nancy Pelosi, the highest ranking Democratic official in the country, walking into a closed hair salon. Remember, they closed all the businesses because COVID's going to kill us all. Walking into that hair salon without a mask to get her private hair appointment because she should be allowed to get haircuts, just not all those dirty hoi polloi who have to stay at home until Election Day so we can continue fear-mongering. The amazing video shows, you got someone in here, you got an employee probably wearing a mask. Then here comes Nancy wearing a robe, no mask on. The employee behind her also wearing a mask. Nancy doesn't need it though. And Nancy, by the way, is in the high-risk category for coronavirus. And she's one of the people more than anyone pushing the hysteria in this country on the lockdowns. But she doesn't believe it, which I've been telling you for months. None of the people pushing this nonsense believe it. It's only the lemmings who follow along. So what's it all about? It's pretty clear what it's all about. It's all about the election. It's all about who we hire to be our next president. So of course Pelosi doesn't believe this herself. Bill de Blasio, when he shut down the gyms in New York, he didn't shut down his gym. Well, he did. He shut it down for everybody but himself. And he got caught and he said, well, I got to look good. I got to work out. Mayor of Chicago went and got a haircut after she cut down the salons. And what was her excuse? She said, I need a haircut. I'm a clean person. I'm a public-facing person. Well, yeah, of course, not like all you dirty people, you dirty constituents of mine. You don't get to go to the hair salon, just me. This whole thing, this coronavirus lockdown, from the very beginning, has been a nakedly political, non-scientific power grab. That's all it is. No separation of powers there. It is a grab by the ruling class, the people who want to tell you how to live your life and who have no business doing it. Fortunately, some courageous conservative politicians in the country, not all so-called conservative politicians, but some of the courageous ones, are pushing back on this. In particular, Ron DeSantis in Florida, showing tremendous leadership during this whole coronavirus pandemic. It's funny because they give all the credit to Andy Cuomo, who's the worst governor in America on coronavirus, whose policies killed thousands of elderly New Yorkers. And then they always castigate Ron DeSantis in Florida, who's done an amazing job and whose policies have defied all the doomsday predictions. So Ron DeSantis comes out, he's talking about the coronavirus policies, and he makes an emphatic statement that should be a litmus test for every Republican politician in this country. He said, we are never going to do these kinds of lockdowns again.
We understand what we need to do, but we will never do any of these lockdowns again. And I hear people say they'll shut down the country, and honestly, I cringe because we know places that have done that. The most draconian lockdown in the world has been Peru, military enforced since March. They have the highest per capita mortality in the world from COVID. And at best, what a lockdown will do is delay. It does not reduce the ultimate mortality, but I think Dr. Alice would agree. It creates a lot of other problems with mortality that a lot of people don't necessarily focus on.
So much information packed into that statement. One, you get the top line message, which is we're never going to do these lockdowns again. Does that mean we can never have any kind of quarantine policies if there's some truly awful pandemic? No, of course not. But we're not doing this again. We're not shutting down the world over the flu again. So then he moves on from there. He says, there's no evidence that the lockdowns help. We talked about this yesterday on the show. Actually, there's a study that was just published by Revolver yesterday that shows that the lockdowns were 10 times deadlier than the virus itself in terms of human life years lost. Obviously true. There's no evidence that the lockdowns are particularly effective. The most draconian lockdowns in the world are Peru. Peru has a terrible experience with coronavirus, a country that basically stayed open the whole time. Sweden, we were predicted this was going to completely destroy the Swedish population. What happened? They're doing a lot better in many ways than their neighbors. So those predictions None of those came true. And then he brings it back to the philosophical point of it, to the actual purpose of the what was the purpose of the lockdowns? Was it to save lives? It wasn't actually. Not really. It was to save lives that could needlessly have been lost had we overwhelmed the hospital system. But we never came close to that. The purpose of the lockdowns was to flatten the curve, not find a cure, flatten the curve. Flatten the curve below the capacity of the hospital system so that you didn't have this situation where people are dying on the street because there just weren't enough beds in the hospitals, for instance, weren't enough nurses to go around. We never got even close to that. Not even in New York, which, in part because of Andrew Cuomo's terrible policies, was hit the worst. We had the Javits Center Emergency Hospital basically completely empty. We had that hospital ship that was sent by the federal government basically empty, unneeded. So none of the arguments for these lockdowns turned out to be true. What happens when circumstances change, when new evidence presents itself? Well, good politicians adapt to that and base their policies on that. And power-hungry cynics who are interested in nothing but the amassing of their own power, even at the expense of destroying the country, like Joe Biden, like Nancy Pelosi, like the entire Democratic Party, they don't change their mind because they're cynical about politics. And it's not even that they're liars, it's that they just don't care about the truth, not one way or the other. What DeSantis is doing, which, by the way, was criticized by some of those egghead conservative politicians, you know, the ones who, they're very sophisticated, they're fancy, they're Republicans, but they're not that kind of Republican. Oh, they're sensible. They listen to statistics. They love the experts. Please don't lump me in with those crazy people like Ron DeSantis. Well, DeSantis was right. The courageous conservative leadership was right. And the eggheads who followed along with the liberal establishment were completely wrong. If you enjoyed that break from disinformation, historical revision, and screaming about the end of the world, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss another video.